Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV, where we believe that you are, well, what? We believe something. We believe that you can be a giant in your own world. And I'm so excited for today's show because we are going to turn the art of obstacles into opportunities. It's time to awake the sleeping giant. Apparently, my obstacle today is speaking. So we're gonna learn how to turn that into an opportunity. Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. I'm Ryan Morris, co-host of Wake Up with Giants TV and co-founder of Tribe of Giants and 12 Journeys Coaching. And I'm here with Nicholas T. Smith, the author of The Giants and the Smalls, the whole reason this dang thing got going in the first place.
Look what I got us all into.
Yeah. Turned an obstacle into an opportunity, or opportunities into an obstacle.
Yeah. It goes in both directions.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, got Ryan involved, and oh my gosh, now here's some obstacles.
And opportunities.
While I learn how to speak on this show, we're also going to dive deep and enjoy our amazing guest, but we've got probably a little bit of housekeeping. We are doing a men's retreat, the Y Fellowship, at the end of the month, the 29th, 30th, and 1st, Draper, Utah. So if you want to come hang out with the Giants and you're a man or want to be a man, then go to yfellowship.com and learn more details. You can come spend 3 glorious days with Nick and I.
Yeah,
it's going to be the most glorious of days.
I don't think there will be more glorious.
I doubt it, except for today.
Yeah,
today will be pretty glorious as well. And then what else do we have going on, Nick?
We've got our integrative book roadmaps, those trainings that we do. So if you want to host one or you want details on that, reach out to us and we'll let you know what that looks like. We usually go an hour and a half in the evenings. And what we do is we teach you the 12 journeys using the book as a framework. And so it's really powerful because it gives you a framework you can use again and again. So that would be the most powerful thing you can do right now is sign up to either attend one of those or host one of those book roadmap trainings. I think that's it. You know, we have the SD group coming up in October, but we're going to hold off on that until we finish the men's retreat.
Perfect. And those IBRs are incredibly powerful. And so we look forward to spending some time with you.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to spend some time with our guest. Nick, do you mind introducing this amazing person?
I don't. So today we have an extraordinary guest, Steve Krivda. So Steve is a man who embodies resilience, transformation, and a deep-rooted passion for impacting lives. From his early days as a martial arts instructor to overcoming life-altering setbacks like lumbar discectomy. Did I say that right? Surgeries?
Discectomy, yeah, but yeah, it's close enough, man.
Close enough.
Surgery,
both are bad.
It doesn't sound good. So his journey is a testament to the indomitable spirit of human will, but that's not all. He's also a certified speaker, trainer, and coach who has empowered thousands of entrepreneurs across the globe. So if you're looking to unlock your inner greatness and live a life beyond limitations, you're in for a treat today. Steve, welcome to the show.
Man, I really appreciate you guys having me here. I've been looking forward to this since day one. I actually woke up for the first time in a long time jumping on a podcast. I got a little nervous.
Did you?
And then we jump on and you guys showed up and went, I'm just hanging out with you guys.
We got this. This will be like a warm blanket, right? Yeah. Well, I'm glad we stylized. You know, we got our wardrobe together, so we all look the same. Ryan, if you want to pop your hat off, then we're triplets. Which one of us is Steve?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe the shiner.
I am.
Sure.
Ryan is. Well, you know, we our goal with these shows is to really highlight your journey and demonstrate for others what's possible when you truly dive into your inner world and start shifting who you think you are. And we like to go back in time to the non-conscious part of your life. And I'll lay a little bit of a foundation here for that and then let you go.
Yeah.
But generally what we see is, people come into this world and they may have some genetic predispositions, but generally their family dynamic plays in, their culture, society, their programming, their own experiences all create who they think they are. And we go through life thinking that's who I am. And we tell everybody that's who we are, and we act it out, and it becomes our reality. And so did you have a point in your life where you kind of woke up to that, where you decided that's not me anymore?
Yeah. Which one? So
yeah, okay. Do them all.
When I woke up, was actually about 10 years ago. And, I had a good friend of mine, his name's Ray Higdon, and he called me up one day and he's like, "Hey, bud." He's like, "What are you doing Tuesday?" I'm like, "I don't know, nothing." He's like, "Great, coming to pick you up." I'm like, "Okay." And we hung up. I never asked him what it was about. What are we doing? Is this something do I need to bring my credit card? What are we doing here? And we ended up going out to it was an ontological weekend, the way of being and how we show up.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I was like, "Oh, cool. I'm going to learn how to make some more money. This is going to be great." And when I sat there, what happened was, the reason I call myself a blind spot coach is because when this happened in my life, I decided to grab a hold of it. And I realized all these blind spots were hanging out in my life that were keeping me from being my authentic self. So 10 years ago, I realized that I'm not this, King Kong chest pounding alpha male that I had been for 25 years. And it was no wonder I was so unhappy in my life, because I was just trying to be something that I'm not. So that was the beginning of it, without going down too far, because I know there's more questions in here.
No, that's good. Whose course did you go through? I went through an ontological course with Brandon Craig years ago. It was powerful, looking at one. Yeah.
This is the Landmark Forum.
Was it? Okay. Yeah. So that's probably where he got his ideas. Huh.
So ontology has been around for a long time. It's actually led me into becoming an ontological coach.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you woke up to that, a lot of people get really judgmental about their non-conscious ways of being. They don't really like who they were. And so they get stuck in justification. They get stuck in their judgments about it. Did you have any of that? How did you navigate that?
I would say before that, the validation that I used was, this is how I gain respect. The only way to gain respect is to take it. I grew up in a small culture in Southern New Jersey where this is how you get respect. And when you get disrespected, you don't have to beat people up. But some people call it posturing up, or, leaning over top.
Right.
If you ever watch two wolves, or you ever watch the leader of the wolf pack come in, and they basically dominate the rest of everybody else. And that's how I thought you were supposed to live life.
Right. And so does that play out as self-fulfilling prophecy? Like when you think that's the way it's supposed to be, you start living that, starts to create that in your reality?
Self-fulfilling prophecy is the only way I can describe it.
Okay.
It creates a very lonely, unhappy, unfulfilled, purposeless life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's look at this. So with the emotion of that, so you wake up to this idea, that's not who I am. I'm not this alpha male. I'm not this guy that's dominant. And, was there a softer side to you? Were there emotions that came up with that? Was there a lot of darkness that came up because you didn't know who you were? Right.
Yeah. Man, this is great. You're talking about flashbacks, Nicholas. Come on now, man.
Well, that's what we're here to do, right? Because you don't think about it, until it gets triggered. And so, yeah.
We're really good at triggering.
Yeah. So when I take a step back, when I think about where I was, I describe it as, I'm sure you guys have been in a boat or seen a boat at one point in time. Well, there's a wake that comes across in the back, and it goes ever expanding.
Interesting.
And that's the wake that I left behind in the people of my life. I look back and I was like, I was a very, it's hard to say this out loud sometimes, especially in front of a bigger audience. However, I believe I'm supposed to have gone through this journey to bring to somebody else. I was a very, very selfish, self-centered, whatever I need to do or say to get what I want type of person. And it didn't matter who it was. I wasn't malicious in any way to hurt people on purpose. I just didn't know that I was doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you came to me and you were like, hey, whatever you decided to suggest to me, and if it didn't line up with what I thought that I wanted, I had no problem in validating and being dishonest.
Mm.
I have a real challenge saying the word lie, but that's basically what I was doing. I was lying to people.
Yeah.
And step on your toes, didn't matter to me. And if I hurt your feeling, or if you hurt my feelings, I wouldn't tell you hurt my feelings. I'd just become really passive aggressive, and I'd show you exactly how painful it was me being in my spot. And if I saw you all of a sudden coming down to my level, that's where I was like, all right, so you get it now. So now we're okay.
Yeah. Wow.
So the wake of people that I left behind, I mean, my wife, our kids, my dad, my brother, I mean, they didn't talk to me for a long time, and I couldn't blame them. My in-laws, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, pretty much everybody. Yeah, it was really, and I had no idea, and I blamed them for it.
Right. At that, well, you don't know any different, right? And so if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, it is their fault. They have this thought, it's their fault. They want to put it out there. Byron Katie talks about that. She says, as long as you think the problem is out there, as long as you think they're the issue, then there's no hope. She said, you'll consistently or constantly be the victim of your own life, right? You'll be suffering in paradise. And so when we look at this, you were suffering in paradise because the environment really didn't change. You changed within the environment. Mm-hmm. And what woke you up to that? What was there a triggering event that said, like a blind spot event, where it just has you really look at it and go, holy crap, that's not working?
Yeah. I had to look at the common denominator.
Okay.
It's me.
Yeah.
I couldn't blame everybody else with all these different personalities, all these different walks of life. And I sat back and I was like, who am I showing up in this relationship? How am I being here? If I would love to tell you who I heard this from so I can give them credit for it. They said, if you have a trigger and you know that you have a trigger, then you're now responsible for that trigger.
Yeah. Wow.
You're responsible for taking care of it or looking into it or doing something about it. And so I was showing up saying, this is one of the most powerful ones that continues to try to show up is always, do you mind if we go down a little bit of a path on this?
No, not at all. Like we are so not rigid on this show. Cool. Yeah, please go off course.
So in my 5th grade year of school, that was about the year that I started daydreaming a little bit. I started thinking bigger, and I started getting really bored with school. So I stopped paying attention, and I fell really behind. And one of my teachers had probably had about enough with trying to keep my attention. And she was one of those raise your hand moments in class. And she knew I wasn't going to get the answer correct, but I always put my hand up. And as soon as I got the answer wrong, it was just enough for her to be just frustrated enough to call me dumb in front of the class, and came up, grabbed my desk, dumped my desk out, talked about disorganization. And I was the epitome of how not to be successful.
Holy crap. Yeah.
So of course everybody laughed, and I became invisible at that moment. But that became one of the things that would really get me. If somebody was insinuating that I wasn't smart enough to do something, or that I couldn't handle something, or don't ask Steve to do that, or how could you do this? Any kind of insinuation where it intended that my intelligence wasn't high enough to handle or be in that situation.
Like you don't measure up, right?
Ooh, man, that was my trigger.
Well, this gives permission to people to really look at their history, because it gives understanding, not justification, to what's going on. It gives understanding of where that might have come from. Yeah. If I went through a similar experience like that, where my teacher said something like that, I would probably go about the world acting like you acted, right? And you wouldn't know any different, because it actually was useful. When you created that way of being, it was very useful, and it actually worked. It got you what you wanted, right? And some of us might say, well, ethically, morally, it's not really the best way to go, but that's our own ethics and morals. It's like it's an individual thing. But you can have some understanding of, man, events like that and other events led me to be who I was being in the world. I can see the pathway, right?
It's an unconscious pathway.
Okay. It's pretty automated, right? By unconscious, you mean automated?
Very predictable and automatic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it goes on whether you know of it or not, and you act it out, and you think you think you're doing it right, so everybody else is the problem. And
everybody else was the problem.
Yeah, right. So the awakening to this is a big thing. For me, it almost takes like the 2x4 to the face, like on Tommy Boy, where they have this moment of just waking you up. It doesn't really hurt right here.
Or here.
But you have this awakening moment where you just see clearly, and you see yourself as you are in relation to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how they're experiencing you as you being you the way you're being you.
Yeah.
And some people really have a hard time with that, because now they turn that judgment that they put on others on themselves, and then they spiral down.
Yeah.
They get depressed and they want to, sometimes exit. And so did you have an experience like that?
Well, in the beginning, there was a lot of blame and fault. And at first I was blaming other people. I'm like, well, then fine, you just don't understand me then.
Yeah.
And then when we look at blame, then it turned inward. When I really had that awakening, what you're talking about here, I looked at all the people in my life. I'm like, man, I hurt all these people so bad. What kind of a human being am I? As though I was doing it on purpose. So I took it in that space. And what's interesting is, and we'll let this part go where it wants to go, is in the world of blame and fault, there's always going to be a payoff in it. So as long as I blamed other people, I didn't have to take responsibility and feel bad. When I started blaming myself, there was also another payoff in that, is that I now get to sit in my, this might be offensive to some, but I get to sit in my own pity party and say, woe is me. You guys should now, instead of being angry at me, now you should feel bad for me. So, if you don't feel bad for me, then I could be back to where I was before.
You become the martyr, right?
And I'm the martyr, man. It is all me. So you should feel sad. So you should love me for that.
Okay. So this creates a distinction here, because this is powerful. If you look at dissonance, so you have a value system, and then you have something else come up that's against that value system. And so it's totally opposite of who you think you should be. But you act on it. Like for me, it's driving my car. Like I'm a nice person until I'm driving my car, and then I'm not so nice, right? And then to justify it, to get out of that dissonance between the two areas, because they're two value systems, then I justify being angry.
Yeah.
Right. And it takes away my having to learn from that situation. Now, that is where, we get stuck, is we justify ourselves out of learning.
Yeah.
We get that pity party, and now I'm justified because now I'm the martyr. Now I'm the victim of my life.
Right.
Even though I created the whole damn situation.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah. If you don't mind if I jump in here real quick.
Not at all.
I believe in these moments. Like, I love the car example, because so many people I talk to, that's usually the example I use.
Right.
That person cut me off. Tell them exactly what I think of them.
Right. And I'm justified.
You're number one.
You're number one. I'll use some other finger, but you're number one.
Definitely number one, though. So I call that a character that shows up as us, or in other words, it's an inauthentic version of who we are.
Ooh, I like that. A character that shows up as us.
So we develop these characters as life goes by. So in that moment of being called dumb, obviously I was upset, and I talked to my dad about it, and I was like, man, we should go get her. Right. And he was like, don't worry about it, son. He's like, I never did well in school either, but what I learned how to do was really work hard. I'm a hard worker. And as long as you can work hard with your hands, you'll always make it through life. So the character that I developed in that moment was hard worker. My work ethic was unmatched. If I opened up the book and I couldn't figure the book out, I'm like, oh, that's okay. I'm not very smart anyway. So I put it down, but I can outwork anybody in the room. So you can see how, like you were talking about earlier, the character serves a purpose, but it also actually is a very positive thing that you can use. And when you figure it out, you can learn it. Right. You can learn how to flip that switch on and off. So I turn that outworker on whenever I need him. But at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, when Danielle and the boys get home, I'm like, oh, I need to turn that thing off so I can go home, go and be daddy.
Let's hang here for a minute, because there is gold right here.
All right, Brandon.
The characters. So we use the context of the smalls, You know, the giants and the smalls. The giant's already in there. You're already the giant. And the smalls come to the giant. And the giant puts them on his shoulder, stands up, and shows them a better way. But the small parts, the character, the parts, in internal family systems, they talk about parts, right? That we develop these parts for our protection, and they are useful when we develop them because they actually serve a purpose. The challenge is down the road, they don't serve so much.
Right.
You know, they're a way of thinking around the environment that you're in, and most people can adapt to their environment pretty quickly, but you create these parts to survive that environment. And for us, it's the small. The small comes in the land of the giants, climbs the giant, says, "Hey, I'm here." But if you don't know it, the smalls are just in the small village doing what smalls do, right? The unconscious parts of ourselves, the characters. I love this analogy. And when people wake up to themselves, they think they're waking up to themselves, but really what they're waking up to are these characters.
Yeah.
Because the giant is consistent. The power that you hold at the center, at the core, is always there.
Yes,
but who you think you are is what varies, because you go from character to character to character. It's like having 10,000 drivers and one steering wheel, right?
Yeah.
And so there was I love the quotes cover Ryan's face there. There was a lady I talked to that talked about multiple personalities, and she studied them for her entire career. And she says, "Isn't it amazing that the body has the ability to create other personalities for our survival? Isn't that amazing?" And I'd never thought of it that way. Part of it is like, oh crap, like how much do I do that?
Yeah.
But how do you talk to these parts? So when these parts come up and you see them and you start talking with them, how do you manage that or navigate that when you talk to these parts? Yep.
I actually worked with a coach about 4 years ago, and we had this conversation because all of a sudden I started realizing there's all these different versions of me that are completely inauthentic that I made up during these different instances. So when I take a look, well, who am I authentically? And I believe that we're all born, and I'm going to take any kind of chemical disorder and put that to the side. That's not what I want to make sure that that's clear. But when we're born, I believe that we're all caring, loving, giving, serving people. So anytime that I'm out of sorts, upset, if I'm in a breakdown, I call it being in a state of upset. Anytime I'm in a state of upset, that means something is there that I'm not seeing. So I immediately ask myself, and this is where I come into the study of context. So I'll finish this last little bit, and then I'll stop if you don't mind. Okay?
Yeah, no, if you'll define upset in there too.
Yeah, so in the upset is anything that's not serving what I'm doing.
Okay.
So I'm a happy person. So if I'm anything but happy, something's showing up there. So if I'm sitting here and I have a reminder in my phone as part of the exercise, it goes off at 10 o'clock, noon, 2, and 4. And it simply says, what am I feeling? So when I read it, I can't get around asking myself the question because I'm reading it as the question. And our mind doesn't like open loops. So it's now an open loop question. It's not, are you feeling okay? Yes or no. It's what am I feeling? So because it's opened, the only way I can do one of two things. I can say, I don't know, which is a very irresponsible way of answering the question. Or I can say, I feel pretty good right now. Is there anything I need in the moment? No. Or if I look down at my list of my agenda for the day or the daily mode of operation, I'm not complete with it. Like I'm really frustrated because I only got 1 out of 10 things done. Well, in the moment of frustration, how do you show up? Am I gonna be like, oh man, I'm so frustrated. This is amazing. I can't wait to get these other 9 things done. Well, we don't. We have an automatic way of being.
Yeah.
So my automatic way of being is I did the same thing yesterday, so what's wrong with me? And then all of a sudden, instead of looking at what's really here, I'm creating a place of, and we talked about it before, I start coming into this woe is me moment.
Right.
So if I look at that, if I take that, I can stay in that space if I want to, or I can say, all right, so what context am I living in right now? I'm in the context of frustration. So in the context of frustration, something's either right or wrong.
Yeah.
So if I'm like, well, I'm wrong for doing this, I'm like, well, who made that up? Well, I did. I made it up that I'm wrong because I didn't get the other 9 things complete. Well, in all reality, there's only what is and what isn't. What isn't is I'm not wrong because I didn't complete the the list. What is there's a list of 10 things and one thing's incomplete.
Yeah.
And that's it. So when I remove the emotion from the equation, I'm still left with a list. Whether I'm frustrated or happy about it doesn't really matter. The list is still the list.
Yeah, there's a book I'm listening to that talks about the emotion, right? If I'm feeling an emotion, I have the ability to take medication that would stop that emotion from happening, which indicates that there's something outside of me that can stop that emotion, which means inside of me, I can also stop that emotion from happening, which means there's a thought going on. Yeah. So when we really get back to the thought of it, I had a conversation with Steve Hardison yesterday, asked him about his view of God, and it was amazing. His view, he said, this book that he had read, who do you think, we'll have to think about it. I think it's Who Do You Think You, or The Art of Being You, or something. It's an older book, but it says God is thought. God is a thought. So when you have a thought, that is creation. That's generative. Like the moment you get into a thought, that creates. Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about emotions being your creations of the world. And so when you have a thought, that generates your emotions. And when you have a thought and you think that's you, you start to create that in your world, and it's just a thought. Yeah. And that thought can generate emotions, but we think we're our emotions. But you can turn your emotions off chemically or with a thought, right? Sure. Yeah. So the power comes back to us, is who we think we are creates everything we see around us, creates our relationships. Yeah, This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes. So the thought, and Steve, I'm probably butchering this, is you can only have a thought about things, and other people will have thoughts about things. And Ryan, we've talked about this. I think Steve talked to you about this. You're only as close to another person as your thought of that person. It's as close as you
or
can
your
get.
Relationship to fear or happiness or any other thing.
Right. Yeah. So these characters are thoughts, right?
Yes, sir.
They're
thoughts, memories, emotions, feelings.
The blind spots that you talk about, those are thoughts, right? Those are the things that you generated, and those generated outcomes, and they were a way of being.
Yes.
So when you get into acknowledging this, so we move through our journeys. We go from non-consciousness to awareness. So you can't change anything if you don't know you're doing it. So you got to bring it to the surface somehow. And then when you do that, to become aware pretty gently. So be gentle with your thoughts around that awareness. Feel the feelings if they come up. So if the feelings do come up, don't run away from them. Just allow them to be there and fully feel them. And then you move toward acceptance, which is to willingly receive what is, to acknowledge this is my reality, this is where I'm at. But like you said, without judgment. It's
no wrong in it.
An observation, right?
Yeah, there's no wrong in it. You just simply
Yeah, go with that. Like, what do you mean? There's no wrong in me accepting my reality? What if it means I'm resigning to it? What is it? What if it means I think I'm going to stay here forever if I accept it?
I love that. So in the cynicism, skepticism, and resignation, those are the three fun places to hang out with.
Okay.
And when you look at those three, you're like, well, I'm just a cynic. Well, I'm just a cynic means I'm a cynic at 11:28 a.m. Eastern. Not that I was a cynic at 11:27. So if I continue to say I'm a cynic, well, then my mind's going to go, well, we need to prove that correct. So let's find some things. I think I'm going to jump on social media and start some fights and political conversations. That'll be fun. I told you the world was terrible. Terrible. Everything's horrible and all this kind of stuff. So we start proving that correctly.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with your thought of having been a cynic. It's like, well, I've been a cynic. All right. It's like, all right, well, that's up until this moment in time. We are in the present now. Well, all the stuff in the past, you could have been you could have been a real booger your whole entire life. It's the nicest way I can say it. And all of a sudden you go, you know what?
That was the nicest way anybody could say it.
We don't curse our boys. I don't saying ASS in front of our kids like, Dad, fuck it off.
Dad.
So what's neat about it is if you take a look at, I've been a booger all up into this moment. It's like, well, if I make myself wrong for being a booger, then somehow in my life, I either deserved it or now I need to punish myself for it. And that's where we're falling into it. That's the rabbit hole I think you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Yep. We dive ourselves down into the dirt with our thoughts about our thoughts, with our thinking about our thinking. And
So,
yeah, go.
this is thank you. This is so much fun. I'm having so much fun today. So
Yeah.
if we take a look at being wrong, it's simply a place that you're incomplete in your life. So if you're incomplete, don't worry. I'll go through this part of it. This
this is part of the ontological approach, is to understand what you mean when you say something, right?
Exactly. Yes. So like in the incompleteness, this is the wake that I talked about in my boat. That was the boat leaving this wake of damage and collateral damage behind myself. Is it because I was so incomplete, not only with myself, but also with that young lady that I call my wife. Thank God she's still around for me. She's full of grace. So when I look at the people, when I was incomplete with myself, in order to get complete with me, I had to go back to those people. And this is where it's like, I'm not going to do this to myself. Comes up for people when you say, well, if I was incomplete with Nicholas, say I came in and I was like, hey, sorry about that. It's 11:05. I know that we had our thing at 11 o'clock, but I slept in, dog threw up on the floor, or whatever validation I use.
Whatever it is, right?
You and I are incomplete. So how I create completeness isn't giving you a bunch of excuses. It's, I didn't allow myself enough time. I apologize. I will do everything in my power. Now, the incompleteness that I had with my wife is that I was very passive aggressive with her. When she would talk to me and I didn't like what she was saying, I'd go, okay. And that meant, we're done with this conversation. I win. You be quiet now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And she would go, oh, the okay showed up? Great. So all of a sudden now we're creating the environment, and what it did was validate that you don't want to listen to me anyway, even though I shut down the conversation.
Right.
So we were incomplete. See, it doesn't matter how the other person was, because I can't control them. I can only control who I am in the moment. So becoming complete isn't going, I'm sorry, and all these begging and pleading and all that kind of stuff. It's like, look, man, I'm really sorry. I probably wasn't very nice to you for a long time, and I'd like to do something different. What can we do here for these things that I've done here? I don't know how to handle this because I was this way, and it wasn't your fault.
Yeah, beautiful.
Period.
It happened to me the other day too. For Nick, sorry to hold your thought real quick, and I'll go. But I'm
going to drop my thought.
Snapped. I snapped at one of my daughters, and I had asked her to go do something, and she didn't do it the way I wanted it done. And then I was frustrated in the situation in the moment that wasn't even caused by her. She was trying to help, and she finally was just like, oh, fine, okay, here, and just walked away. And I was like, oh. And I realized what I had done, and how I was behaving. It was already out of my mouth, which sucked a little bit, because you're like trying to reel it back in, and
right.
And but I did this not knowing that the complete incomplete verbiage. I pulled her back into the room, and I apologized for what came up in me and how I behaved. And I apologized, and I told her, I said, it wasn't you.
Yeah.
This was me. So I need to examine how I'm being and what came up for me that came out. I'm asking for forgiveness, and I'm committed to do something different so that you don't hold that against me, so that's not something like that defines our relationship. And I apologized and told her how much I loved her and how appreciative I was that she was trying to help. And it was a little bit hard on the ego.
Yeah.
But the relationship is she messaged me while I was gone camping, and I didn't have a cell phone service, and she does this when I go out of town, or she will tell me good night, I love you, no matter. She'll come into our room every single night. She's almost 15, almost 16 years old.
Yeah.
And that relationship, like I'm so grateful that I've worked on the relationship, and the awareness that when I do let that slip, or when I am a human sometimes.
Yeah.
You are?
It's weird, huh?
Weird, man.
That I can do what you just did, and the power that comes in that to that's where there's growth, that's where there's stretching, that's where there's bonding of relationships, that's where there's improvement, that's where the giant grows, the small who was already a giant grows, is in that awareness and then doing something about it. So thank you for I'm gonna do the incomplete, and work that direction. That's amazing. So
Look at
thank
the
you, Steve.
possibility you created in that relationship with you and your daughter. You can feel it all over the place, man. You did that by simply putting your character to the side. I call the ego the character. He's the one that shows up and says, no, 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 no. We can't say that out loud. Are you crazy? That could be hurtful. I don't want to be vulnerable. I need to stay safe. As long as I'm winning, I'm safe. And you put that to the side, man. That power is inside of that is, somebody said superpower. Yeah. That's like you get a D on your Superman, your super dad outfit, man. That's amazing. You taught your daughter something so strong that if you were to pass today, she can have that forever. You may have broken a pattern.
Thank you.
It's awesome, man.
There's a dream I had, Ryan, remember this years ago, about the lake, the glass lake in front of you and a boat on the lake, and everything in front of you is glass. There's nothing on it. But behind you, like you talk about, Steve, is this wake, and that wake is everything you've ever done. And what we tend to do is have our wake guide our boat. We think, because I've been that's going to determine where I go from here. But the truth is the glass out in front of you is unwritten. It's uncreated until you create it. And so how it gets created depends on the character that shows up. Is the giant showing up, or is the character showing up, the small? And then if the small does show up, imagine in the story, if the small had climbed the giant and he's like, get out of here. I don't want you here. I hate you. The small wouldn't have come back to the giant, would have hidden in the background and been real passive aggressive about life. Right. And so when we recognize that we've allowed our small parts or our characters to live our life and guide the boat, well, once we realize that, then we can do something about it. Right. Once you realize you have a trigger, now you're responsible for the trigger. Once you realize that you have a behavior, now you're responsible for the behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Who is it? There's somebody that said, you did the best you could with what you had, but when you knew better, you did better. There's somebody that needs attribution on that, but I don't know who that is.
That's when you say, like I've always said, Nick.
Like I've always said, right?
This is how I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that bring up for you, though, as you hear that, when your character shows up and you recognize that your character's there, and you have these tools to recognize your character is there. How do you navigate into changing that into a more powerful character or realigning with your core?
Yeah, it's in the noticing.
Okay.
So now we get to it's a really fun part of the conversation. Like, this has all been fun so far, but we're just up. It's just Nicholas. I've never seen you, brother. I'm coming in for a bear hug. I'll be ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. They won't be able to tell us apart, though.
That's all right.
We just become brothers. We just become best friends.
So in the character development, as it comes up, right? We have all these things, and I have a really fun illustration here. Is that when we are sitting in that place of, this is always happens to me, I'm acting predictably, automatically, however you want to say it. When we're basing everything we're doing now on how we've been in the past and how the people have shown up and how all these different things that are happening we've been talking about here, we take all of that and put it in the future as a possibility.
Right.
Looks a little bit like this. Dad was mean. Mom was mean. I got bad grades in school. This happened to me physically or emotionally when I was a kid. And we take all these things and we put them in the future as though it's going to happen again. And we base all of our decisions around that. And what it does is it creates a predictable future of unhappiness for most people. I'm not saying it's 100%, but I would say a good 99.9. Be pretty confident in that. So if I say, if the self-fulfilling prophecy you mentioned was, I remember sitting there, am I the only one on the three here, just curious, that heard that don't cry before I give you something to cry about?
Yeah.
It's usually a dad to son thing. And
it was brothers to brothers.
Yeah, they were a little bit quicker to give you one of these too.
Yeah.
And so
No hesitation.
Crying is not a manly thing to do. It's not powerful. It's not all this kind of garbage.
Yep.
And I remember sitting there with Andrew. He's now 15, so 10 years ago. Man, funny how that 10-year keeps coming back. And he came up out of his room for whatever reason. He was crying. And I'm like, oh no. You know, I run over, I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. And I go, why are you crying? And he kept saying the words, I don't know. So I was getting, as a dad, there was a lot of things that showed up here. One of the characters that showed up as me was helpless. So in the world, I don't know about you guys, but in the world of helpless,
you don't know how to fix it if you don't know what it is. Right? Yeah. So and we're fixers. We're guys. We're dads. We're men.
Right. He's crying. I can't help him. I'm his dad. I mean, what the heck? I'm a big, strong guy. Who do I need to beat up? Right. And he kept saying, I don't know. And I'm like, well, then stop crying. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah. This is simple. Just stop crying. Stuff it away. What's happening?
The more I said stop crying, the more he cried. Because now he's in a place of wrong. At 5, by the way.
Yeah, wow.
So this is a pattern, by the way, that comes through our lives as generations, right? So I remember grabbing him and going, son, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And I went like this, and I didn't shake him around. I don't raise our hand. We don't hit our kids or anything like that. But I wanted to give him a physical pattern interrupt, which I didn't know back then, by the way. This is something I know now. And when I did that, when he looked at me, he stopped crying, all right, but his cry was replaced by a face of fear.
Yeah, wow.
And at that moment in time, I realized that I made my son afraid of me. And I went, there's another one. So one of my characters is when I'm helpless, I would have tended to show up overbearing and overpowerful. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a conversation with Danielle, you guys, a work cohort, it doesn't really matter. That's what would show up. And I would make them wrong so I could be right. I'm the one that's right. Even if I just had to outpower you until you just stopped arguing with me. It didn't really matter.
That's closing the gap on the dissonance, right? Like you're a nice guy until you're not. And then when you're not, you're justified because this is why you did it. And so now you don't have to learn from it. And so you stay stuck in that pattern, that character, right? Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
So in that moment, I was able to take a look back and go, man, look how I showed up. So look in this character that I showed up. So I can take a look at that and go, well, I stopped him from crying. So it worked.
Yeah.
Or I can say, look at the emotion that I just created in this young man who's 5 years old.
Right.
So what did I just do? I just created a new pattern, which Ryan course corrected with his daughter. And if I didn't catch that, so I immediately took a step back and I looked at him and I go, hey, you go, what's that? And I go, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that. And I said, it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry. Even if you don't know why you're crying, it's okay. And he looked at me, and that's when the tears really came. And he hugged me. And of course, now I'm crying. So now we're both, and I just pulled back, and it completely shifted our entire relationship.
You know what it reminds me of is a happy ending to My Name is Earl. Right?
Steve's gone.
Oh man,
that's how he could have ended the whole list. Is like, own your stuff, man, clean it up. But we do that. We create this pattern, and to end one thing, we cause additional harm in another thing, and the interrupt is really clean up what you caused.
That's creating completeness.
Yeah.
It's in order to become complete and whole, it's cleaning up the mess you made by being out of your own integrity, being out of your word.
I want to tie this into the topic, and we don't have to stick to topics here. It's our show, so we can get way off course.
We get to do what we want to do.
Yeah, but the obstacles in the world, truly, it could be a way of thinking about the obstacle that turns it into an obstacle. So you're thinking about your thinking, or you're thinking about the event, could be the thing that turns it into suffering, an obstacle, or anything else. That same thinking would be the thing that turns it into an opportunity. And so the way you look at it, like with your son as an example here, is the obstacle is he's crying. The obstacle is that you don't know why he's crying. The other obstacle is your character shows up. And the thinking was all that was happening between you and your son. The way you were thinking about him, the way you were experiencing him was all that was happening.
It's all that was
And
happening.
you showed up in that thinking and in a moment turned that obstacle into an opportunity. Look, son, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have responded. That's an opportunity. That's when you recognize and take ownership of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did that. I am so sorry I did that. I own that. Let's turn this around. How can we clean this up? But not out of, because people want to clean up out of fear.
Guilt.
Yeah. Or shame.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different. That's a different energy.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, sir. Guilt's a very interesting thing. I believe that we made it up. Is that we think we deserve something for who we were. And if we really take a look at where we are in this moment in the conversation, because most of us act so automatically and predictably, and we don't even know we're doing it, we think as though it's happening on purpose, and it's not. Look, if I'm a jerk to you guys right now, it has nothing to do with either one of you guys. It's something I'm dealing with, not you.
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Man.
I've been nice, right?
And
cut.
Let's kick him out of the studio.
But if you take a look at it, even so, here's a really powerful example. I love using. I use a lot of real life examples because they hit home so hard for me.
Yeah.
I go into, it was 2 summers ago, and our boys, Andrew's 15, just now got a very closely monitored Instagram account. But other than that, they really don't get a lot of screen time. They haven't. We won't do it. And so it was summertime. I walk into his bedroom. He's on his iPad, and I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I'm like, oh, you know the consequences, son. I'm like, just hand it over. Like, this, we don't need to be angry about it. We set the agreement up. There's no expectations. He hands it to me. I take it from him. I'm like, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if I want to know the answer to it. He's like, what's that? And I go, is this the first time you went behind my back? And he goes, no. I'm like, how long? He goes, all summer. And I go, and I just want to go, right? So my initial thought, how I was observing the situation, he's being disrespectful, he's disobeying his dad and all this kind of stuff. And it was personal for me. Yeah. But when I stopped for a moment and really observed how I was observing it, I looked at myself in the situation. I'm like, there's something else here. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to say some really mean things. So I'm going to hold on a minute here. And this is exactly how I said, I'm like, I'm going to leave for like a minute and I'll be right back. I'm like,
just sit tight.
I'm like, don't worry. I'm not going to freak out when I come back, but I just need to gather my thoughts. He's like, oh, okay. I'm like, so just have a seat. I'm like, it's cool. We're good. I just wanted to make sure he wasn't freaking out for like a minute.
Yeah.
I came back in and here's what I realized, guys, is that the reason that young man was lying to me is because I created the space where he felt like he needed to lie to me.
Yeah. Wow.
And I told him that, and he goes, I'm like, no, it doesn't.
He's like, what is this? Is your
very
fault?
Confusing, right? I'm like, it doesn't discount that you were dishonest. I said, there are going to be consequences for you being dishonest. I said, however, I'm also responsible in this.
Yeah. Wow.
So here's what I'm going to ask of you. We made an agreement of, I said, this is really crazy as a dad. I was like, man, I can't believe that just happened. I wanted to freak out on him. I said, why don't we do this? If you tell me the truth, when I ask for the truth, and I pull a moment of anger and frustration, I'm yelling at you or whatever, it's okay to stop me from talking and say, Dad, remember that we were going to have this conversation. Take it easy, Tony. And he says, okay. And I go, I promise you that I will stop because I want to hear you and create a place where you can be honest with me without being punished for being honest. And he goes, all right. So I can honestly say, and I'm
then
sure
the list comes out.
I can easily say he's been dishonest between now and then. I mean, he's a human being, right? There's a safety mechanism that comes in. But I can tell you that when he has been dishonest, the parts that I know about, he's come back and said, hey, earlier when I said this, I wasn't honest with you. Can we become complete with this? Because it was weighing on, because our core, one of our core values in our family is honesty.
Yeah.
And he's like, I was dishonest with you. And he goes, I don't want to have this relationship.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So it changed the whole dynamic because I saw how I created that. See, we all have responsibility. Awesome. We all have responsibility for the person, for the conversation. We have responsibility in it. Even how people show up with us. We created the environment for them to be that way, either freely self-expressed, angry, frustrated, or even dishonest. We have a hand in that.
We have our responsibility in what we put out, right?
Exactly.
They have responsibility in what they hear in it, but we also have responsibility to check with what they're hearing.
Exactly.
Right? There's this idea of putting ourselves over into our other neighbor's yard, right? So you have two neighbors that are fighting, and they're both right. It's like the 6 and the 9 on the ground thing, where they're fighting over what number it is. And when you get over to the other side, you can create an understanding of where that person is coming from. It doesn't mean it creates agreement. Just simply means that you have understanding of where they're coming from. It also doesn't create change. Understanding, I think it was Brandon Craig said it's the booby prize of life, right? It's like you can understand something and then not change it. And so, but when you put yourself over, like in your son's situation, like, wow, what would it be like to experience dad from over there?
Yeah.
Doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just simply, okay, now I've got a sense of what you're experiencing when I come to you in this space. And that's it, right?
Yeah, and it comes down to this, man. It's the context that we're living in. So if I'm listening from a place of love, I'll hear that. If I'm hearing from a place of resistance, I'm going to find that too. It's kind of like if I said, what do you see here?
Yeah.
What do you see?
I see 2 fingers, the peace sign. I see the number 2. I see a lot of things there.
Right. The
A
sign,
V.
the letter
Yeah.
V, a bunny rabbit, maybe. I don't know.
Bunny rabbits.
But
got a cute little button nose on it.
So what that proves, right? What that proves is that no matter what I give you, even if I say this, even if I give whatever I give you, there's going to be all these different perceptions and interpretations of what's happening. So if I can interpret something some way, then there's 2 other interpretations also on this screen.
Right. Yeah.
So which one's right?
All of them.
Yeah,
they're all right. Truthfully, like we all have our truth.
Bingo.
They're all right.
Yep.
Because it all depends on what's going on inside of that person. And that's their truth.
Yeah.
The being able to communicate that, like the space that you gave your son to be able to communicate his truth, open the door for him to come in and hold up a family value of honesty, right? Because if you didn't give him that space, then he'd continue to do it behind your back and be passive aggressive, just like dad was passive aggressive.
Yeah. And he'd be an expert too.
Yeah, he'd be good at it. And he'd be a human, just like every other human. So really it comes down to how you look at something is going to determine how you act on that thing. So the character that shows up is the one doing the thinking. Yeah. So that character that shows up, if you're showing up in a space of insecurity, then you're going to look at the world from that view of insecurity. You're going to have insecure thoughts. You're going to have insecure emotions. Right? If you come from the space of anger, same thing. That character that shows up, that's the fighter, is going to look at everything as a fight.
Yeah.
A battle. Yeah.
Can I respond to one of the comments? It's beautiful. For sure. Somebody said, I can't, it just says Facebook user for me, so I apologize for not being able to say who you are. Who the heck cares if your children can respect us? What we really want is they can respect themselves. And when we open, and I love that. So it's beautifully stated, because when we open up the area, when there's an open communication between parent and child, and we create that place of being freely self-expressed, the only way they can be freely self-expressed is because they're already in a state of self-respect.
Right.
It's not to gain respect from dad or mom. It's that I'm doing this because my integrity says this. The word that I said that I am in the world is telling me that this is how I want to be with my family, not because I'm doing it for my family.
There's a big difference. Product. It's a big difference. It's coming from fear rather than coming from your power.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So teaching your kids to come from their own power is what we're trying to instill in our kids and other people. When I do a coaching session, I don't want them to think they need me like I'm some kind of drug and they can't live life without having me in it. I want to teach them to do this for themselves so that they don't need me.
Yes, sir.
Like truthfully, because we are all equipped with that power to heal ourselves, but our way of thinking about it is what keeps us from healing, right?
Amen. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Just keep preaching, right? So we're already at 54 minutes in.
So upset about that. That's my
I know we can go a bit long, if there's more to cover, let's cover it. So
your guys' show, man. I'm here.
Well, I'm going to tap on some things and touch on some things here because we've really dived into the inner world, because this is where everything happens. When we get into our root journeys, we hang out there and people don't like it because they'd rather do the fun stuff. Like, let's talk about vision and abundance and surrender and all this fun stuff.
They don't want to uncover the frosting and get to the dog poop.
Like
Steve Krivda talks about.
Right. One of our participants this week in our training, she's like, I hate you, Nick. And I love you. Like,
yes.
Yeah, it's hard.
I totally get her.
I have a shirt that says I'm not bipolar, I'm just becoming a giant, because you go through this like, this is hard. This is hard. This is uncomfortable because you go back and forth between your emotions and your thoughts. So hanging in the root journeys that we call them, the blind spots, is really powerful, because once you clear that up, you elevate your view of the world. When you can see the world a little differently from in here, you see it differently out here. You see possibility, you see abundance, you see vision, everything is possible. You start to let go of how it comes about. You're not as controlling. So we go through the journeys of uncertainty where you don't know what's going to happen next, even if you think you do. Just because your past is awake behind the boat doesn't mean it's going to drive the future. But we like to bring it forward and say, oh, I know what's going to happen next. This happened last time. So we predict that, and then it becomes self-fulfilling, self-sabotage. We repeat it, becomes insanity. Limiting. So what we want to do is open that up to possibility. Everything is possible when nothing is sure, that everything you need is already around you. Everything, all the resources, people, opportunities are already here. They're accessible to every human. And the only limitation would be your imagination about those things. And your ability, like Einstein says, imagination is more important than knowledge. So our ability to reach beyond what is into what could be is the power that we hold as human beings. No other creature has that.
Yes, sir.
And then to go into surrender and letting go of how it comes about and trusting that the pathway will appear allows us to grow ourselves in new ways, which leads into the nurture and ultimately the legacy or the fruit of our journey, right? So in hearing that from Steve Krivda's point of view, how do you navigate those things? Uncertainty, abundance, surrender, vision, all of those things. How do you navigate that?
All right. Awesome. Man.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. So in the future of us and who we are, if I were to ask you right now, what's going to happen at 12:05 today? You'd be like, well, I'm probably going to have lunch. Are you? Are we gonna be in March of 2020 and you're gonna get a text from a friend that says, hey, the government just shut down the United States of America? Probably not gonna have lunch now. So we have this almost certain future that we create. And the almost certain future looks like this guy. This is us, right?
Yeah.
So it's about the only way to really create your future and to come from a place of invention of what I want is to realize that there's no space in the future for invention because we created this.
Yeah.
Right. So the moment I say I'm going to venture into this, I'm going to start coaching corporate CEOs, billion-dollar business owners. That's going to be my new thing. That's going to be what I'm doing. Right. And it's like, well, I heard somebody say that before you can coach there, you have to be there yourself. So that's probably not going to work. So I took that and I put that as a line item of my future, right? Not even allowing something to be. I've already shut it down. That's my almost certain future that now is automatically an inevitable future.
Like I know that's not me, so I'm going to go ahead and line item that out, right?
Yeah, that's what you call a no agreement, a quote unquote no agreement, NO. Like I've already agreed that it's a no, so why even bother trying? So I'm just going to keep myself in this smaller place of playing. In order to become complete with something, you've got to see it for all that it is and all that it isn't. So this is going to be a very, I use this example on purpose because it's usually a powerful example. Well, my mom passed away in 2001. I was on a path to, I was living my dream at the moment. I was running a martial arts school. I had just come off of a national championship, full contact karate. I was just living, and I was very unpopular in my life for a long time. That's another word of saying single. And then I got in really great shape. I became this guy running a karate school. I'm running a karate aerobics. I'm running women's kickboxing classes. I'm like, so you can imagine I was living in a different world. And that was in November of 00. In 01, when mom passed, she passed from cosmetic surgery. She was having a challenge getting rid of the last pooch on her belly from having my brother and I. And she came to me. I'll make this short. She came to me. I was a personal trainer as well at the time. I was trying to help her. She was open at most things. There were some things we were having a challenge on. I'm like, I'm not going to damage our relationship. It's cool if you go get a trainer at the gym. The gym and her trainer, they had the same kind of a misunderstanding. So she's like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I have 7 of my friends who have also gone to this doctor. I'm going to go here. And 2 days later is when she died.
Holy crap.
And there's a lot of things that happened in that moment. There was a lot of anger and guilt and frustration. I was mad at her for making decisions because she was being selfish. I was mad at myself because I didn't have patience. And if you look at all these things, look at all the added meaning that I put on somebody being here one day and not the next. And what I needed to do was justify that intense amount of emotion that I was having in the moment. So instead of being with what's really happening is sad, I turned that into guilt, frustration, fault, and anger. I felt for some ridiculous subconscious reason that felt better, that I could control that more, which is not the case. And so when I pulled back for a moment, guys, and I was like, all right, so what did I make up and what's real? Because in that moment, I also, 7 days before her passing was my birthday. And I said, I've never been so happy in my life. 7 days later, my whole world did this.
Yeah, wow.
So there was 2 things. One, happier you get, more pain comes. That's number 1. That was number 1 character. So as soon as I started getting happy, sabotage showed up, didn't notice it, just thought, see, I told you.
The other shoe will drop, right?
Yep. So number 2 was, it's my fault. If I would have just been, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And I made that up because I believe that there's no such thing as chaos in the world. I believe everything is supposed to be the way it is, whether we like it or not. I have to believe that, because if the chaos theory is correct, this conversation is a waste of time. If I believe things line up the way they're supposed to always be in this moment, because somebody right here is listening to this conversation going, I can't believe I tuned into this. This is like they're talking to me.
Right.
Everything's lining up the way it's supposed to be. So if I go back and become complete with what happened, I can say what didn't happen was she didn't do it on purpose. She wasn't like, hey, I think I'm going to end my life this week. That sounds awesome. I'd love to leave my children and my husband. It wasn't, oh, I think I'm going to stop training my mom because I just don't care about her. Wasn't that. It was my mom made a decision and then she died. That's it. So what it left me room for was I can be sad and just be sad, be okay with being sad that I miss that young lady. And I still call her a young lady because my mom was only 39 forever. That young lady that's on my wall that's sitting there staring at me right now going, man, thank you for being complete with me. Now we can actually go back to a loving, caring relationship, even though that I'm not here.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. A creation. That's a creation.
Inventing a new future, because before, even with my wife, and so I'll finish it here because this should wrap it up quite neatly, hopefully.
Yep.
That was in 01. 17 years later, I'm in the kitchen watching my wife cook. Pretty cool moment. You can hear the kids goofing off in the other room, not fighting. Freaking awesome. And I just sat here and I'm like, I'm getting emotional. I'm like, I can't believe it's happening to me. I'm a full-time entrepreneur. I'm successful. I'm like, is this even real right now? I'm like, I got a relationship with God. I'm like, what is going on here? And I said out loud, I went, man, I've never been so happy in my life. And I went into a straight full-on panic attack and had no idea why it was happening. Danielle looked at me and I'm ugly crying. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. I literally ran out of the kitchen in my bedroom, slammed the door behind me. I said, give me a minute. And it was because in that moment, when I said, I've never been so happy in my life, I hadn't said those words in 17 years. My mind went, I'm going to lose my wife. Oof. It was instant.
Yep.
And I came out and I was like, wow, look what I made up according to a past experience that I had over almost 2 decades ago. So that was keeping me from showing up as my most powerful, happy person, my happy self, this guy that I authentically am. It was keeping me from the ultimate form of happiness, which is God has given me a gift of my wife and our boys.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even able to enjoy them because I was too afraid to fully give myself into their relationships.
Well, thankfully you interrupted that thought too, so that it didn't play out, because you could have played that out and created that as a reality of losing your wife.
Yeah, I'm too happy, so I need to be like the sabotage, the undeserving, the unworthiness, all of those things come in. 7 days happy, 7 days to world falling apart.
I would have pulled out of the relationship emotionally.
Yeah.
Start disconnecting immediately because this is going to happen.
And just a thought about that relationship would create that.
Yep.
That's it.
Not even know.
In an instant.
Yep. So complete disconnection would inevitably, she might not have passed away, but since I pulled away from my relationship, then we would inevitably break up, get a divorce, or whatever you want to call it.
It would have happened, right?
Creating it. It's really, it's incredible.
Well, constantly creating. We're just not conscious of it.
When we take all those things and we really look at what is creating the reaction, not response in our life, you're going to start seeing this is not enough a room on this paper. But when you see them, you start becoming complete. This is what your future now looks like. And this is from a place of invention. You can invent your life from this space.
Yeah. Should we mic drop right there?
Thank you for letting me share that. That was
you're very welcome. I think that's powerful. I would like to ask though, what is your legacy? What is your reason for doing what you're doing? I love Viktor Frankl's work where he says the meaning of life is to give meaning to life. And Pablo Picasso says that, the purpose of life is to discover your gift, and the meaning of life is to give it away.
Yeah.
And Steve, if you look at your why or your purpose or your meaning, your gift to the world, what is that? What are you hoping to create?
Something really strong is for a long time it was to spread happiness. It's really a loose statement.
Yeah.
And I'm really close with the Ziegler family. And Tom wrote in one of his books, I believe it was Choose to Win.
Yeah.
It says, legacy isn't the passing on of benches or hospital wings or money. Legacy is passing on your morals, ethics, and values to the next generation. So when I take a look at my morals, ethics, and values, do I have them or am I them? And that's the difference. So if I can have a conversation with somebody and have them challenge who they've been, if I have them take a look at how they've shown up in their life, if I can help somebody see something different with their family, with themselves first, and see how that's been around their family, how are they showing up? Then there is a place where people say, you can't just be happy. I challenge that all day long. We can be happy. We haven't created the space for it to show up. So when I have a conversation with somebody and I challenge I don't want to change anybody's beliefs. It's not my job as a coach. My job as a coach is to challenge how they've come up with those beliefs. And if they can look back and go, I'm unhappy, I'm like, all right, well, where did that belief come from? Or I'm stupid. I had a client of mine who said, and I'm a little bit off track on your question, and she said, I'm writing a book, but I stopped writing it because my family told that said the books were stupid and I'm stupid. My very first question was like, are you stupid? And she's like, well, no. And I'm like, well, then where did this belief come from? And she said, oh, you know what? When this is what I was told over and over and over again. So when she wrote the book, it was a confirmation of this past belief that she thought she had let go of or became complete with. And when I said, is it possible, just going to throw this out there, that book that you wrote for children, because she's a children's author, she's great at what she does. Is it possible that the 3 people out of the 8 billion people on the planet, the 3 people that you showed your book to just weren't the right people for your book? And she went, never really thought about that like that. No. I'm like, who's your book for? And she's like, children. I go, who'd you show it to? My parents. And she's 65.
Huh. Holy cow.
So so my legacy is to have people challenge who they are. Who are you? Who are you authentically? Not this inauthentic character that shows up as you, but who are you authentically? And when you show up authentically, you have no choice but to be happy.
Powerful. Ryan, final thoughts?
I think Steve is 26. I think
that's an inside joke. So we'll catch you up on that one after the show. We didn't even get to talk about some more of your obstacles. I mean, how do you sum up who Steve Krivda is and all of his experiences in an hour and 11 minutes, 1:11 right now? That's awesome.
1:1. Yeah, right.
Yeah. A while back, Steve, I've watched you for a while and was introduced to you by Tony Schmaltz. And amazing. And he is one of my giants as well. And you have become one of my giants in the world. And watching you when you had a health obstacle and you fell, and I mean it was brutal.
It was pretty bad.
It was pretty brutal. Like I'm like, holy cow, and to watch you smile with no tooth, right? And big gash in your head and look at it in such a different light. That for me was a physical representation of what you're talking about. So anybody that's watching this, go follow Steve. Go to stevekrivda.com. Find him on Facebook, anywhere that he is, because this man doesn't just talk about it. He lives it. He has difficulties in life just like you. They come in all kinds of forms and fashion. It's what he does with it that makes him so powerful. It's what you can do. You can learn this stuff. You can change the patterning. You can change it. You can practice. It's a practice. There was a comment earlier that said it's hard to be vulnerable. It can feel hard to be vulnerable. That's a construct.
Mm-hmm.
Steve gets vulnerable because he knows the power in it. And then he shows you. He is a giant. It's weird how all these giants are named Steve. We comment it all the time. Steve Chandler and Steve Krivda and Steve Hardison. You could go through this long list.
I was thinking of changing my name to Steve.
I am Steve Hardison. I am Steve Krivda. I am a giant. There is no difference. I guess if there is a difference, it's that they've just figured out a couple of things that you don't know, and they can teach you and show you how to do it so that you can go back to the real power of who you are really. I'm crying because it's that what you're doing is life-changing. It is generational change, like you talked about, where somebody like my daughter now gets the opportunity to see that displayed. That dad is human and he makes some mistakes, but he becomes complete. He adjusts it. He fixes it. He's still a fixer. He's still a dude.
Yeah.
We could still be a dude. We could do it in a healthy way. And so for those of you that are watching, go follow Steve Krivda. Go get around him as much as possible. Watch his stuff. He is powerful. Anytime he comes on Facebook, I am captivated. I've watched a lot of your stuff over the last couple of years at work. Sorry to my employer because
it was on break.
Yeah. It was, yeah.
It was on, 15 breaks a day got a little weird.
Yeah, it was
51 minutes. Okay.
but it can have the power to radically change your life, and the only person that can really do that is you.
Amen.
Go find him, go follow him, and thank you, Steve, for being that, because you are a giant. So thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I love you, brother. I
Love
appreciate
you too,
that.
man.
It's beautiful. For those that are watching, we always want to acknowledge the giant that's already there. It's already in you. It's time to be. There's no becoming it. Sunshine mentioned that to me the other day. There's no becoming the giant, Nick. You're already that, right? You're already that. So to be the giant already that's in there and unbecome anything that makes you feel small, insignificant, less than, to speak with these characters and say, look, I've got it from here. It really is the power that you have. And so the thinking about your world is creating your world. So what are you thinking about your world? What are you thinking about your emotions that's generating your emotions? How can you shift that? And you can shift it in an instant. You can turn it around in another direction in an instant, the moment you notice it.
Yeah.
Right. So start paying attention to what's coming up for you. What characters are showing up to play your world, and how are they creating it? And is it time to interrupt that and do it a little differently? And you don't have to be mad at them for showing up. They did what you taught them to do. Right.
It's being grateful for them being there, man. That character shows up because there's a breakthrough coming. Be like,
Right.
oh, I wonder what's coming. This is gonna be great.
Yeah. Beautiful. Embrace that. Right. So give your character a hug. If you're a character, give yourself a hug. Know a character, go give them a hug. Just give some big hugs, right?
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate each of you for being on. Your comments make the show. If you haven't joined the Tribe of Giants on Facebook, come join us there, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube and share this with your friends, family, loved ones, anybody you know that deserves to be a giant in their world. Share this video with them.
Which is everyone.
Yeah, correct. I was trying to calculate, is there anybody that's not? No, that's everybody. So share it with them. Thank you for being a part of our community. We love you, and we will see you in the next episode.
Cool.
Make it
Thank
a giant.
you guys. And I'm so humbled right now.
Yeah, awesome.